welcome to rule number 1. What is rule number 1? It's quite simple. Learn phrases, not just individual words. This is very important for your general English learning and for your mastery of business English. What's the normal way of learning business English or even just general English vocabulary? What do you normally do? What do textbooks normally do? What do schools normally do? What do most students do, in fact? Well, what they normally do is they memorize words from a vocabulary list. In a textbook, at the end of every chapter, there's usually a list of new vocabulary. And they have one word in English, and then maybe they have a translation into your language or a definition. Then they have another word, and then another meaning, another word, another meaning. It's this big, long vocabulary list. And what do most students do? They just study that list. They just try to memorize the list. You know, number 1, memorize, memorize, memorize. Number 2, memorize, 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 all the way down the list. In a school, you do this to get ready for a test or a quiz. And then you take the test, and then what happens a few weeks later? Well, you forget most of those words, right? That's the natural process. That happened to me when I tried to learn Spanish in high school and university. I took Spanish classes, and for the test, I would study these vocabulary lists. I'd memorize them. I'd get a good grade on the test, but then a few weeks later, I would forget most of the new vocabulary. This is the problem with just trying to focus on individual vocabulary words. You'll notice there are a lot of English lessons or podcasts out there, especially for business English. And all they do is just teach you individual words, you know, the word of the day, and you learn one new word. That's not terrible. I'm not going to say that's horrible, but it's really not a great way to learn business English. You see, children, when they learn their own language, they naturally learn phrases. A phrase is a group of words. It's a group of words that naturally goes together, that we usually use them together. And if you study only individual vocabulary, you will not know exactly how to use those words. You don't know which words to use them with. You don't really know what situation you should use those words with. So you're missing a lot by just studying individual words. When you learn a phrase, you learn all of those things. You automatically learn words that go with that word, right? A phrase is 2 or 3 or more words that naturally go together. This is very important. To sound natural in business English, in a business English conversation, you need to use words correctly. You need to use the right words together with other words that connect to it. You can't just throw out individual words and use them in the wrong situations and in the wrong kinds of phrases. That's not good. It doesn't make you sound like a confident, strong, intelligent business person. It's not good. So instead, what I want you to do is to focus on phrases, groups of words. So anytime you learn a new business word, for example, don't just write down that word only. Always write down the words around it. Always write down the phrase that word is in. Right? So for example, the word meeting. That's an easy word. You know what a meeting is, a business meeting. Let's imagine that is a new word for you. If that was a new word, what normally you would do is write down the word meeting and then you'd write the meaning. But I don't want you just to write the single word. I want you to write the whole phrase. For example, we're having a meeting today. Write down having a meeting. Having a meeting. That's a full phrase. It's very important because we use the verb have with meeting. Those two words naturally go together. This is natural in English. We don't say do. We don't say today we're doing a meeting. And that's a common mistake. I actually hear business English students saying that phrase, doing a meeting. Let's do a meeting. It's not wrong grammatically, but it sounds strange to a native English speaker. If you say that to an American, let's do a meeting, it just sounds a little strange. It doesn't sound correct. It's not a natural phrase. It's not a natural phrase that a North American business person would use. So you want to sound correct. You want to sound strong. You want to sound intelligent when you're using business English. It's so important in business English especially. In business English, you're doing business. It's a serious thing usually. You're talking to a customer, you're talking to another company, you're talking to a representative, you're trying to get a job maybe, doing a job interview. So it's very important that your phrases are correct, that you're using the words correctly. And the best way to do this is to follow rule number 1. Always learn phrases, groups of words in English. Never study just individual words. And that is rule number 1 for excellent business English conversation.